two of the most well-respected AI scientists, a survey that came out last year of about 2,700 AI researchers. It asked them, what likelihood do you assign to superhuman AI having a catastrophic outcome, i.e. human extinction? And the average estimate was about 16%. So that's about a 1 in 6 chance that something goes catastrophically wrong with superhuman AI. These models might build biological weapons. They might be able to operate autonomously. They might have goals that differ from our own. And they might end up having fairly cataclysmic consequences for the human race.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to WIT, which is what I think. Today, I have a special episode with guest host Heather Ashley. You might remember her from our last episode talking about advocating for AI. Today, she has brought on a special guest, Felix DeSimone, organizing director of Pause AI US, a grassroots movement demanding an international treaty banning the development of superintelligent AI until it's safe to proceed. His work sees him advocate for the common sense AI safeguards to Congress, organize groups of volunteers throughout the country, and build coalitions of support for the Pause AI mission. We're going to focus on 3 things today. The existential risk from human AI, which is literally the movie Terminator, a potential international agreement to pause some developments, and starting a movement. Recently, Heather was written about in Buzzfeed. A lot of her friends identified her in the recent Will Smith video, using footage and using AI to enhance it. And I want to ask you, Heather, about what happened and what exactly this means and, what's going to happen going forward.
Great question, Derek. It's been a crazy situation. Basically, one of my friends from SAG-AFTRA DM'd me a screenshot of me and was like, hey, this is you. I thought it was a joke, but it was from a video Will Smith posted on social media from his concert. Apparently, it was getting a buzz with people saying, hey, this video, it clearly uses AI for people in the crowds. It already had a lot of controversy, but I was the first identified as a full, real person that was an AI version of me. It was very jarring because you don't want to believe it's you.
You obviously weren't there.
It's definitely not there. It could have been anybody. It's super ironic that I find myself in this position because this is the exact thing that myself and Felix have been working to address legally on the federal level, on the state level, trying to protect people from stuff like this happening to them where their image is misappropriated and misused. And if I had been hired as an actor, or usually there's some sort of compensation for use of your likeness. Yeah. There's definitely some legal problems here I'm still trying to sort through.
Always finding yourself unwanted center of controversy. But you're trying to make a difference and brought on Felix, so we're excited to talk to him. With all our guests, we ask them, what is the definition of AI? We'd love to hear that from you, Felix. Then I'm going to pass the baton to Heather Ashley.
Derek, Heather Ashley, thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here and to talk with you more about this topic. So when I try to define AI, the first step is realizing it's a broad umbrella term. I usually break it up into categories: tool AI and superhuman AI. Tool AI are systems that we can understand, systems that can be safely harnessed and kept under human control, systems that have specific use cases and specific functions, and ultimately systems that, while they can be used for good or evil, it's not a question of them exercising their own goals over human beings. So this is the vast majority of AI systems today, everything from the GPS on your phone to Siri. And so these are the vast majority of AI systems. At the same time, there are ongoing efforts to build superhuman AI. Superhuman AI is the proposed idea of AI systems that can perform any cognitive task at least as well as a human being, systems that can act autonomously, independently of human oversight, systems that have goals of their own that they can pursue independently of human beings, and ultimately systems that could pose serious harms for the human race. And when we talk about pausing AI, we're not talking about tool AI. We're not talking about controllable AI. What we're really talking about is pausing the development of human level or beyond human level artificial intelligence at least until we know how to build it safely and to keep it under control.
Did you have a moment that was the catalyst for you getting involved in the work you're doing now? What inspired you to pursue that?
I'd like to say there was a single catalyst moment that flipped the switch for me. There wasn't quite as much that. It was a few discrete steps. The biggest discrete step was in 2023 when the Center for AI Safety released a statement. The statement was quite short, said mitigating the risk of extinction from AI should be a global priority alongside other societal scale priorities like pandemics and nuclear war. Human level AI systems could pose an existential risk to the human race. This was signed by hundreds of top AI scientists, company CEOs, academics, nonprofit researchers, you name it, they were on this statement. And that was unnerving to me. And as someone who originally had more of a background doing climate change related advocacy and listening to scientists' warnings around fossil fuels go unheeded for decades, I was beginning to watch history repeat itself with AI. So I became determined to get involved.
It's a big parallel. I've just seen Felix and I, we both know each other from doing work on Capitol Hill, meeting with congressional offices, Senate offices. Can you share the work towards establishing an international treaty on AI? Can you share why that's important right now and how this would work in practice?
There's a couple of things that we're focused on at the federal level. And it can be basically boiled down into education and mobilization. So education is just getting the word across to these congressional offices that this is a real and serious problem, and that this is a problem that is frankly beyond the scope of what they might be expecting. To summarize concerns around catastrophic risks from smarter than human systems, I'd like to share quotes from AI scientists last year, Jeff Hinton and Yoshua Bengio, both of whom are considered godfathers of AI, both of whom have won accolades for their work inventing deep learning. Hinton won the Nobel Prize. Bengio is the world's most cited living scientist across all disciplines. And they wrote a paper together trying to explain the risks of these advanced AI systems. And so just to give a select few quotes here, they write, once autonomous AI systems pursue undesirable goals, we may be unable to keep them in check. AI systems could gain human trust, acquire resources, and influence key decision makers. They write, in open conflict, AI systems could autonomously deploy a variety of weapons, including biological ones. We may irreversibly lose control over autonomous AI systems, rendering human intervention ineffective. They say this unchecked AI advancement could culminate in a large-scale loss of life, the biosphere, and the extinction of humanity. That's very important. These are two of the most well-respected AI scientists. A survey that came out last year of about 2,700 AI researchers, it asked them, what likelihood do you assign to superhuman AI having a catastrophic outcome, i.e. human extinction? And the average estimate was about 16%. So that's about a 1 in 6 chance that something goes catastrophically wrong with superhuman AI. These models might build biological weapons. They might be able to operate autonomously. They might have goals that differ from our own, and they might end up having fairly cataclysmic consequences for the human race. An analogy I like is, why do human beings control the world? Ultimately, it's because we're very smart. We're the most intelligent species on the planet. We use that intelligence to achieve our goals. If you think about the effect we've had on the earth, if we cut down a rainforest to grow crops, we do it because farmland is useful to us, and the monkeys just happen to be in the way. If a superhuman AI system has its own goals and its own agency, and those goals also require resources, and humans happen to be in the way, we've already seen what happens when you have conflicts between a more intelligent system and a less intelligent system. Derek, I know you mentioned Terminator earlier. I think this is much closer to the movie. Just have been warning about this asteroid. Some people are raising the alarm. Others have their heads in the sand. We're trying to get people to face up to the threat we're facing. But yes, sorry, that was a slight tangent to your question, Heather Ashley, which is what our efforts have been looking like in Washington, D.C., engaging with policymakers. So yeah, half of the effort is just educating them about the topic and basically telling them what I just told you. The other half is calling for solutions. Our top solution right now is an international AI treaty that pauses the development of smarter than human AI until it's safe to proceed. The basic pillars of this idea are, number one, having this kind of international agreement not to build smarter than human AI. Number two, having drastically increased investment into AI safety research. So actually making sure that we're funding safety interventions, that we have robust standard setting around how to make these systems safely. And number three, having a range of verification mechanisms and enforcement mechanisms to make sure that rogue actors, individual countries or companies aren't building these systems behind our back. There are a few reasons we support this international agreement approach. So one reason is that the default that we're on right now is an arms race between the US and China, where each country is incentivizing speed over safety, right? The problem with that is that if you end up building an AI system that escapes your control, it doesn't actually benefit your country. So it's not a economically viable device that you can use to secure dominance over your adversaries. It's more like a doomsday weapon. If you're the first to build it, the only benefit is that you might just end up blowing yourself up faster. We're very hopeful about trying to prevent this arms race between the US and China. One reason is we think the US and China can work together despite considerable differences. But the point is that this is an instance of rational self-interest. So neither of our nations is going to benefit from building technology that we lose control over. China's ambassadors have signaled interest in working with the US on this. China's ambassador to the US recently said building AI could open Pandora's box. He and other Chinese diplomats support closer collaboration to prevent catastrophic scenarios. And again, we don't need to assume that the Chinese government or the American government, for that matter, are well-intentioned. We don't need to trust them per se. We just need to assume that it is in their own rational self-interest not to want to build something that blows them up.
Let me hit 2 points. I love movies, obviously. I think you brought up a good analogy. One of the things I want to ask you, I'm going to answer 2 questions. One is, are you saying that no one's taking you seriously? Like you guys are presenting a list of things and a how, an organization, and everyone's okay, yeah, and then suddenly the meteor hits and that's it? I'd love to hear more about your challenges and struggles. And number 2 is, I read an article about what they are doing in China. They're focusing on tool AI, efficiency with AI. They've established that, which is great, and they're not going towards the superintelligence route. They're not really good at PR. I did read this article, which I thought was fascinating and exciting because it sets goals and establishes intentions.
Absolutely, yeah. So having answered both of those questions, so the first question about how we were being received, I'm actually fairly happy to report we're being received better than I would have anticipated. At this point, I've had close to 100 meetings on Capitol Hill. Many of our local groups and volunteers have had meetings with their congressional offices. These meetings revolve around educating offices about the problem and inspiring them to act on the solution. I've been pleasantly surprised. Many offices don't have a preconceived notion of what AI is and the dangers. Heather Ashley can probably agree with me on that because she's joined me in some of these meetings. Many of them truly have never heard of superintelligent AI before, haven't heard of the existential risks involved, haven't heard about the scientific concerns. And so we have a real opportunity to educate them about the topic in a way that they genuinely not heard of before. So that's been quite encouraging. Many offices have been receptive to our solutions. Occasionally we get pushback on how can you trust China on this? How can you verify? And we end up talking a lot about verification mechanisms. So there are ways to verify and to hold the Chinese government at their word. We can track the sales of AI chips. We can monitor the largest AI training runs, detect if there's a huge electricity surge in the middle of the night in an underground bunker. There are all these ways to actually verify that another country is upholding their end of the deal. We talk a lot about verification mechanisms with these offices. We have made progress convincing offices this is possible. The biggest roadblock is the amount of money and the amount of influence that some of the frontier AI companies have. Similar thing happened with climate change. You had scientific consensus in the 1970s, 1980s, that fossil fuel emissions were going to have an outsized impact on the climate. And then you had companies like ExxonMobil that decided rather than changing their own business practice, they were going to instead bribe and lobby politicians not to regulate fossil fuel emissions. And so history is starting to repeat itself with AI. You have organizations like a giant lobbying related group. I forget the technical term, but they and other organizations funneled tens of millions of dollars into lobbying congressional offices not to regulate AI. They killed a bill in California last year called SB 1047, which would have set up some fairly common sense safety testing measures and other safeguards to make sure unsafe models weren't being deployed. They have a ton of influence in Congress. That's the biggest hurdle we're facing. The biggest way to counteract that hurdle is by mobilizing the public, getting tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands across the country to write and call their elected officials, meet with senators, demand stringent AI regulation, and drown out the voices of the AI lobbyists. But obviously, that too is an uphill battle, and it's one we're hoping to succeed at in the coming years.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit more? Like, why is it that the public hasn't already had that moment of realization and rising up saying, we're not okay with this? Is it a psychological thing and resistance to existential threats to some degree, or they're not taking it seriously, or they just don't know enough about it right now? What are your thoughts?
It's a good question. I think there are a few different factors taking place at the same time. One factor is that until fairly recently, there wasn't a lot of great public-facing communication about this issue. Historically, if you think about the people who have done an exceptional job writing about existential risks from superhuman AI and the control problem related to controlling artificial intelligence models, many of these folks have predominantly come from academia. And the contributions that they've made have been superb. To be clear, I am not minimizing their contributions at all. They are heroes of the human race. But one flaw is that academic tones of writing and incredibly technical academic papers about AI control aren't enough to get a mass movement. The same way that technical papers about atmospheric CO2 concentration wouldn't be enough to get a mass movement about climate change. So until recently, there's been a dearth of public-facing communication on the topic, which thankfully the tide is beginning to turn on that. You have books that have been published geared towards the public. You have podcasts like this one and others that have cropped up. So you're beginning to see a lot more of that, and hopefully that'll help turn the tide. I say that's one factor. Another factor, frankly, is that the public is overwhelmed with how many different things are happening simultaneously. It could be hard if you're trying to pay the bills, or you're already worried about some other policy that you oppose in Congress, or whatever the case may be. You might be juggling 10 things, and the last thing that you want to have to deal with is a big 11th thing that you hadn't heard of before. So that definitely doesn't help. And I think the third factor is the urgency of the problem. Safety researchers have been warning us about this for some time, but until fairly recently, many people assumed that this could be decades away, that this could happen in the 2050s, the 2060s. AI systems were facing serious roadblocks, and we didn't have anything to worry about in the near term. Since the release of ChatGPT 4, and really in the last 2 years, that's when you've had this kind of oh crap moment from AI safety and researchers saying these systems are progressing way faster than we expected them to. We now expect there might be human-machine intelligence parity by the end of the decade, maybe even sooner. So we have less time to deal with this. That's another part of the problem, is that it is actually, if you think about it, much more recent than you might assume, and therefore there's been less time to activate the public on that.
You're talking 5 years from now.
Human-machine intelligence parity means that AI systems become at least as intelligent as human beings. Another way to think of this, you may have heard the term artificial general intelligence get thrown around, AGI. You may have heard the term human-level AI. There's always a little bit of vagueness around what people mean with these terms, especially AI companies themselves, which have a product to push. So definitely take what they're saying with a grain of salt. But really, what I, and more importantly, what experts have been saying is that AI systems are improving very rapidly, and they might be as intelligent or more intelligent than human beings, possibly within the next few years. A few data points on this. One data point is extrapolating based on current trend lines. 2 and GPT-3 systems that existed a few years back had toddler level language, and they were useless pretty much. GPT-4 represented a phase change. All of a sudden you had language models that could output high school level essays, that could exhibit kind of the beginnings of multi-step reasoning. Since then, models like GPT-03 and Claude 4 for Anthropic that are having increasingly sophisticated and increasingly advanced capabilities. OpenAI's O3 model was recently tested on a virology test and outperformed 94% of human virologists. That's concerning given the risks of biological weapons and biological warfare that these models might produce. You have AI models beginning to outcompete human beings in expert domains. The reason we are not at or near, we might be near human level intelligence, but one of the main bottlenecks so far has been task time and autonomy. These models are exceptionally useful and shorter task intervals of minutes, they begin to break down, often hallucinate at longer task intervals. One thing that you should know is that the length of task time, in other words, the length of time that an AI model can stay focused on a task and operate autonomously, this is a length of time that's been increasing quite a bit, from minutes to tens of minutes to possibly hours over the last year or so. So the worry there is, if you follow the trend lines, you go from toddler level to smart high school level in terms of overall knowledge of the world. You go from incoherent to hours to potentially days in terms of the length of time that you can stay focused on something. And you have increased levels of autonomy and increased levels of also things like persuasiveness, like the ability to manipulate human beings, which we're already seeing from some of these models. And you end up with a scenario where you might cobble together smarter than human AI, possibly as soon as within the next few years, although there are wide error bars on that.
Wow. It could probably beat me on the SATs for sure in vocabulary, but that is pretty scary. So what do you see as, if, for example, AI could meet and equal human intelligence, like in 5 years, what does that mean for the common person?
The worst case scenario is that AI takes over the world. This is not me saying, this is the top-cited AI experts of all time saying this. The crucial thing to remember is these systems have goals. That goal-seeking behavior might lead to power-seeking behavior, and that power-seeking behavior might lead in turn to the disempowerment of human beings, right? So many experts are worried that in order to achieve their goals, these goal-seeking AI systems could end up acquiring resources, could end up undermining human decision makers, automating human beings out of the loop, and ultimately trying to paint us out of the picture as much as possible. The same way that if we cut down a rainforest and kill a bunch of orangutans, it's not that we hate the orangutans. They just are sitting on land that we can use for something else. The worst case is the AI systems literally begin to self-improve, become rapidly more intelligent than human beings, have goals of their own, need resources that we have, and decide to take us out of the picture. That's the worst case scenario. Again, going back to the 1 in 6 figure, there's polls suggesting a median 1 in 6 chance of human disempowerment or extinction.
I think the fact that you are an advocate for the environment, which is a end of world scenario, that you've shifted, am I right, all of your energy and time into AI policy. You are saying AI policy sits higher on the priority list in end of world scenarios.
There are fewer people working on it. We haven't done enough on climate change, but in terms of person hours spent on it, more has been done over the last few decades to mitigate the risks of climate change than has been done to mitigate the risks of superhuman AI. So as an individual, I and others have the ability to make more of an outsized impact on something that's still quite new. If this problem gets solved, they'll go back to fighting climate change, because that's another civilization scale threat we have to deal with. So humanity, I do not envy our position. We're playing a game of whack-a-mole between AI, climate change, and nuclear war. It's not a great position to be in. I do think that, like with nuclear war and like with climate change, there is hope on the horizon. There are things that can be done to mitigate this risk. And I think I'll just like to say one other thing about the AI treaty aspect. Some people are skeptical about the idea that the US and China, these great enemies, can work together, right? Especially on something like AI, where we're currently racing against each other. Some people basically say a treaty is nice in practice, but it's basically done on arrival. I disagree with that. We've done similar things before. One of the main reasons we're even alive today and haven't already been blown up in a nuclear war is because the US and the Soviet Union in the 1980s agreed to limit the proliferation and development of some of their classes of nuclear weapons. Scientists like Carl Sagan discovered that the proliferation of ash and dust from a nuclear war would cause a nuclear winter, that there would be global famine, and that billions of people could starve to death. In other words, that nuclear war was even worse than we thought. And as a result of that, you had policymakers beginning to get worried. You had people like President Reagan beginning to get worried. Reagan got spooked by the threat of nuclear winter. He wrote dozens of letters to Mikhail Gorbachev, the leader of the Soviet Union. And over the course of some years, they ended up negotiating a treaty that banned an entire class of nuclear missiles, intermediate range nuclear missiles. And there's a great line from one of the summits they appeared at where they jointly signed the statement, I believe in 1985 or 86, And the statement said, a nuclear war cannot be won and must never be fought. So that's the same kind of realization we need to get to when it comes to building superhuman AI. I'm hopeful that if we mobilize people the same way that the nuclear disarmament movement mobilized people, and if we convince policymakers the same way that Carl Sagan and others convinced policymakers, humanity still has a fighting chance.
That's encouraging. There have been technologies that have been developed only for people to realize, hey, this is actually way too dangerous. This could end catastrophically. I think cloning, human cloning, was one of those, and mere DNA. It was something with mere biology. That was another one where scientists recently developed that, and they were like, oh, wait, this could literally ruin everybody's immune system. This could wipe out all of humanity potentially because our immune systems would have no defenses to mere biology. So I think that you're right, there is potential. And if it's framed that way towards the public, towards the lawmakers, that there's definitely room for this to have a positive outcome. That is encouraging.
What do you think the ingredients are for this type of realization for the leaders to come together? How can you get others to join your movement?
Absolutely. So I would say the biggest ingredient that up to this point has been missing has been mass mobilization. As I mentioned earlier, we are facing this roadblock of AI companies that have quite a bit of influence on Capitol Hill, that can lobby and spend tens of millions of dollars to kill AI regulation. We don't have tens of millions of dollars. I wish we did. We have way less than that. But what we do have public support. And to reference a little bit of why we're hopeful on this in this regard, there's been a lot of polling suggesting that overwhelmingly the public is on our side. 63% of Americans support a ban on AI smarter than humans. About 3/4 of Americans believe that AI could pose a threat to the human race. A plurality of US citizens support an international treaty banning smarter than human artificial intelligence. This cuts across party lines, by the way. This is both Democrats and Republicans supporting these measures. We need to translate that support into mobilization. So not just hypothetically answering a poll, but actually going out there, calling your elected officials, emailing them, writing them letters, banging on their doors, asking to meet with their offices, doing everything you can with the urgency this requires to make sure we don't drive off a cliff. We have a network of local groups set up. Each of these local groups puts on community events, tries to engage the public, tries to mobilize the public to write letters to Congress, to attend protests and demonstrations in support of AI policies, to meet with elected officials. If you're concerned about the future of AI, I would recommend basically a few different things you can do. So one thing you can do is to you yourself write and call your congressional offices. Tell them that you're concerned about this technology. Tell them that you don't want superhuman AI to be built. Tell them that you support an AI treaty that bans superintelligence and you support strong federal regulations to make the system safe. Congressional offices aren't hearing enough about this issue from constituents back home, and that if they heard more, they would make it more of a priority. So each of us has the ability to really make an outsized impact here by contacting their Congress members and being persistent about it. That's one thing. The second thing that you can do is to join our movement. Pause AI US, right now we have about 15 local groups. Each of them are doing grassroots mobilization and lobbying. We need to do a lot more of it. We're looking for way more volunteers, way more leaders. And whether you have a local group in your own area that you want to join already, or want to start a local group of your own in an area in a city where such group doesn't already exist, we want to have you on board. So you can go to our website at pauseai-us.org. You can even send me an email. I'll give out my email address publicly, felix@pauseai-us.org. Please write to me. We'd love to onboard you. We'd love to get you involved. We need to make this movement as big as possible, as fast as possible. So if you're watching this and you aren't sure, take a leap and do something. The future is counting on you.
People can go to the website and sign up for a mailing list for them to sign a petition or take action. Maybe it's 5 minutes out of their day, but you get mass public support.
We have a petition on our website for an AI treaty calling for the US to initiate negotiations. Even if you only have 30 seconds, you can do that. If you have 5 minutes, you can write to your lawmakers. If you have an hour a week, you can start getting the ball rolling in your local community. There's levels of engagement that you can plug into, and we want to have you.
Books you recommend or anything like that, resources outside of Pause AI's website?
There have been a few books that have been written on the topic. I mean, this is quite a nascent field. Much of the writing until fairly recently has been more academic, more jargony, but thankfully there are more books now and more web resources that are more publicly accessible. So on the book side, there are a few, they're actually on my shelf here. One of them is the book Uncontrollable by Darren McKee. So this is a book subtitled The Threat of Artificial Superintelligence and the Race to Save the World. It lays out the threat of superhuman AI in very clear, very publicly accessible manner. And it talks a little bit more about what both individuals and policymakers can do about it. There's also this book written by my friend and colleague, Lewis Berman, called Catastrophic, The Unstoppable Threat of AI. Despite the subtitle, it does talk about ways to stop it. It's a great book. It's really a collection of essays and vignettes. I have an essay in there, but many people, apart from myself and Lewis, do as well. And it talks about, our concerns around superhuman AI development and policy solutions and what can actually be done. There's also a book coming out fairly soon called If Anyone Builds It, Everyone Dies. This is written by Eliezer Yudkowsky and Nate Soros, who both work at MIRI, the Machine Intelligence Research Institute. And so that's also a book about the development of superhuman AI, the existential threats to the human race that poses. And more importantly, it ends with a call to action for what citizens can do to turn the ship around. The Center for AI Safety newsletter is another great one, very accessible, very well written, that goes over some of these issues. And there's also, in addition to this excellent podcast, there's another YouTube podcast called the AI Risk Network, formerly known as the For Humanity podcast, which has a very frequently gone over many of these topics, has some excellent guests, and is very publicly accessible as well.
On my podcast, I have different people who are in AI. They have startups on AI, so I don't want to alienate them. For me, I'm happy it checks my grammar, and I hope it cures cancer. Those are necessary for humanity. Are you saying you're not trying to stop it, you're just trying to place some control valves, and that is more of the mission? It's a reasonable approach to AI.
Most AI systems today, the overwhelming majority, are tool AIs. These can be safely harnessed. These are things that can be tasked with doing specific things, that don't act on their own, that don't try to deceive human beings. The vast majority of value from AI is from narrowly scoped models that can do powerful things without evading human oversight. I would love to have more applications of machine learning in medical research. I would love to have more applications of machine learning in science broadly. I'm an astronomy guy. I've been encouraged by what the James Webb Space Telescope has been putting out. I know that we need gigabytes of machine learning to analyze the data coming from that thing. I'm very supportive of tool AI systems and the possibility of narrow AI that is safe, that is controllable to advance their quality of life. Our concerns, along with the experts' concerns, are more that we shouldn't be building something that we can't control, that could become smarter than us and have catastrophic side effects. But obviously, let's make sure that we innovate smartly rather than swiftly and steer the ship in the right direction.
It's frustrating
you're
because
not looking to make the world hunt for berries, go back to fishing or something. I know Heather Ashley is also tech forward as well.
yes.
I think that's important
And
to clarify to most people that this is a balanced approach.
Yes. And it's more so that the top AI companies right now are being the extremists. Some congressional offices we had met with had pushed back and said, oh, some of these concerns are hypothetical concerns about where AI might go. But it's not hypothetical because this is what all of the top AI companies are gunning towards right now. They're all openly saying really concerning things and openly saying we want to push for superintelligence. Meta made headline news of hiring a superintelligence team. Brought on Alexander Wang from Scale AI, paid billions of dollars. They clearly intend to build this out. It's confusing because the general public feels powerless or not fully on board, or it's not taken seriously. It's a strange dynamic and situation. I did have one additional question for Felix, if we have time. I've been following along with all of this, trying to stay on top of everything since the release of ChatGPT 5, which was anticipated for years. It seemed like it was a letdown for people where they were like, oh, this is it? Like, we thought this was like so hyped, and then this isn't that impressive. And yeah, it just feels like there's been talk of an AI bubble. Curious your thoughts on that. I've heard some people say, oh, LLMs, large language models like ChatGPT, they have limits. Transformers are something that were used to construct the LLMs, and people are saying that new architecture was revolutionary, but now we might need a new architecture to build superintelligence. I know you don't work at an AI lab, so you may not have all the answers. Even if you did, you probably wouldn't be able to tell us because you would probably have signed an NDA. But I'm curious to hear your thoughts on all of this.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't work at an AI lab. I don't have any special insights. There are
Good.
things that come to mind. The biggest takeaway from my perspective is uncertainty. It's possible we're in a bubble. It's entirely possible that deep learning will hit a wall soon, that we'll see drastically diminished returns from large language models, that you don't get the true kind of generality and long-term, long-range planning that you need for human-level AI. That's a possibility for sure. It's also possible that maybe another order of magnitude or two of computational power unlocks new breakthroughs that could just be around the corner. It's also possible that even if scaling laws diminish, in other words, even if you don't get the same returns, someone might make an algorithmic breakthrough to harness existing power more efficiently. Any of these are within the realm of possibility. I can't predict the future. All I can say is that there is a range of possibilities, that a good chunk falls in the catastrophe range, and we should do everything we can to move away from that. People skeptical of human-level AI, I pray they're right. I would love not have to worry about this, honest to God. But I do sometimes think about people who have gotten it wrong in the past. The New York Times, one of my favorite examples is that in 1903, the New York Times said heavier than air flying machines might be possible within the next 1 to 10 million years. In December 1903, the Wright brothers flew for the first time. So there are examples of experts getting it wrong. The point is, we genuinely don't know what the future looks like, and so we have to operate out of an abundance of caution as a result.
That's great insight. I didn't realize that about the airplanes. Wow.
I think this discussion's been great. I'd love to hear more. I just watched the Apple announcement about what they're coming out with, and the focus was not on artificial intelligence, which was good. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be keeping an eye out. I want to thank you guys for putting in your time and effort to make sure we're all okay. I hope people will sign up at Pause AI and see what they can do and if it makes sense for them, and keep the discussion going. So thanks, guys.
Thank
Heather
you,
Ashley,
Jared.
appreciate it. Pleasure.
Thanks for coming on.